to our weekly class on our various topics, studying the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda, Om Guru. And welcome today also, today's summer solstice, the 21st of January, and the longest daylight of the year. The sun has reached its most northern part of its journey out into the north, and now it starts its journey back toward the south. And today, I was trying to figure out a way to fit that into today's topic, but let's see if I can do it. I don't think I can, but maybe I will. The topic I chose today to talk about is how to face one's challenges joyfully. Now, my original thought when I came to this topic was maybe what I should address is the topic of Deposia. But I thought, well, if I put that as the title, it's a little bit off-putting to think about Deposia. Because people have many different, you might say, impressions of what that topic is of Deposia. It sometimes sounds a little bit not something that one would normally enjoy doing, but really, if we understand it properly, we see that it has an important role to play in the spiritual search. And essentially, Tapasya means being firm and staying centered within the self and doing that which resists being pulled out of our center. Master used to say, stay always in the self. Come down from the self to engage in daily activity, to engage in work, to be with people, to do your duty in life, and then always return to the self. But of course, there's forces in this world that we come down from that higher self, engage in the world that continue to pull us out. And Tapasya is that resistance to that. And you could say it's a joyful embracing of those challenges that want to pull us out. And so we have to use conscious effort to be able to remain in the self or to return to self, and strengthen ourselves. And so often these practices that people formally call Tapasya type practices, what they're doing is you might say, strengthening us to be able to do those things that will allow us to remain in the self. But really, from a spiritual point of view, we shouldn't really think of these things as grim or somehow unpleasant. They're just the natural things that ultimately will bring us joy. And so consequently, I think a better way to look at it is the application of this in daily life is embrace the challenges that we face joyfully. And so applying to Tapasya, Tapasya itself should be life then becomes and I'm using the word broadly here, everything in that way becomes a kriya action, something that it happens to us. It's not onerous, but it's an opportunity. So you could say it's turning challenges into opportunities and acting in a way that uplifts us, which means what? It means acting joyfully in whatever the circumstances are that occurs to us in life. Now, that's a pretty big challenge, but isn't this what a saint does? A saint who has transcended, and by that, when I say a saint, it's somebody who has transcended that ego consciousness, that the ups and downs, the likes and dislikes, and a saint, somebody, of course, whose consciousness rests in God, or somebody whose consciousness rests in joy. And in that sense, to be able to see joy in everything we do, see joy in every circumstance, and be able to focus on that, this, of course, is what makes a saint. And that, of course, is also those actions that are not engaged in creating new karma for ourselves. So this, you could say, for all of us, this is what we're trying to achieve in life. This is the direction we're wanting to good or that are, that because sometimes when we talk about Deposia, when we think in terms of consciously doing things difficult, and I even say that from time to time, as a sense of self-discipline training is do the difficult thing, not always the easy thing. Well, it doesn't mean it's wrong to do the easy thing, and it's probably not necessary to constantly be taking the hard part. And so it's not wrong to lead a pleasant life. Just don't do it at the expense of, you might say, abandoning your ideals, doing it at the expense of forming a bad habit, doing it at the expense of abandoning what your higher self really knows and really wants. And seeking God does not mean seeking hardship. Those anchorites that go out and harm their own body or scourge themselves. It doesn't mean you have to go out and keep your arm up in the air or do those things purposefully, but it means seeking the highest and accepting whatever challenges Divine Mother gives to us of her will. You don't have to go out and seek it. Some people come onto the path of seeking God realization, and they're very fervent, and they seek out challenges or hardships, let's say. I want to work off my karma quickly, and so I go out and I seek difficult things, and so I can work out in this lifetime, Divine Mother. I want to work out all of my karma. I'm not sure that's a wise thing to say. I admire the aspirational, devotional approach to that, the fervor one has, but really, let come what Divine Mother will send to us. In other words, we don't need to go out and seek our challenges, but the harder thing, I think, and the more useful thing, let's say, is to be able to accept those challenges that come to us and to deal with them, again, coming back to this theme, a deal with what comes of itself joyfully, or keeping one's center, or peacefully. The challenges of the day for each of us are enough. We don't have to go out and consciously create, you might say, more difficulties for ourselves. And I think this applies, this idea of looking whatever comes to us in life as a challenge is, you could say, is approaching it joyfully in a spirit. And how do we do that? It's a spirit of self-offering ourselves to respond to whatever comes to ourselves. So if we have a challenge comes to us, we respond to it in joy, which means on a very deep level, we're responding to whatever comes to us in the accompaniment of God consciousness with us. So to the extent that we reply to everything that comes to us, respond to everything that comes to us in God consciousness, that in itself, God, whether we use the term God, whether we use the term joy, or one of the other attributes, it's all responding in the proper way. And you'll find that as you begin to do this, everything in life begins to flow easily. And you begin to, if you make it a conscious effort, you begin to see that within every circumstance, there's that opportunity. And I think we need to do this as individuals, living up to our highest ideals in the highest state possible. But I think as a sangha, as an Ananda Sangha, we need to also respond, you could say, in a joyful way together, as responding to challenges joyfully, because circumstances affect us as individuals, but circumstances also affect us as groups. Like each of our centers, this pandemic that has happened recently, it's been a challenge. It's been a challenge for each one of us individually. It's been a challenge for each one of us as a family. It's been a challenge for each one of us as in terms of Ananda Sangha as a center, but that challenge has presented us is an opportunity to respond to it in the proper way. And you could say it almost as Divine Mother is testing us. To ask God to be with us to face whatever challenges we have, how can we help but not be on some deep level? On some deep level, how can we not be joyful? There's joy within every circumstances, and our job as the devotee, our job as the disciple, is to try to extract that in every situation. Swamiji used to say when he was put out of SRF, he said he could feel his consciousness on a couple of different levels. He says on a day-to-day level, he was in a very despondent state. He was not happy, and on a day-to-day level, you might say, because this great tragedy had happened to him. And he said, but it was very interesting. He says, but on a deeper state, he was always aware that on a deeper state, there was a deep calmness there of Master's grace, Master's presence. Now, sometimes he felt that what the pain was not the outward circumstances that had happened to him. The pain was that it it clouded and put a veil a little bit between him and his attunement with his guru. And he was worried about, that's what he said was causing the real pain. He says, but even so, behind that, there was always this consciousness of joy was there. And it was his choice in every circumstances to attune himself to that joy, to accept that joy, or not. And one of the interesting things that I've found in my own life, I've noticed that as well, that there's always joy there if I choose it. But for some strange reason, sometimes I don't. I sometimes feel, because I'm so caught up in the ups and downs of you might say the waves of feeling of success, failure, happiness, sadness. I'm so accustomed to those that I hang on to it. There's an attraction to the duality of this life, even when that duality is painful sometimes. You know, the person says, well, I'd rather feel pain than feel nothing. And so maybe it's a lack of faith that joy is really there. But nevertheless, the awareness of it is there. And the tendency of you could say the attachment to the ups and downs of life keeps us bound into that way, into those waves of suffering, pleasure and pain that people have been enduring for lifetime after lifetime. And you could say it's like the bird in the cage. The door is open and the bird knows that the door is open, but you can see the door and you can see freedom there, but it doesn't want to go out. Isn't that interesting? It doesn't want to fly out into freedom. And we are like that. The door is open. Sometimes it takes a while before us to recognize that. But then when we do recognize that, it takes that courage to step out and to go out into that world of freedom that awaits us. And this is, I think, the courage to do that is you could say the journey. It'll certainly, maybe it's not the first step on the journey, but it's a step on the journey to put one's faith in the Guru, put one's life in the Guru's hands, and answer affirmatively to the invitation that God is giving to each one of us to trust in the Lord. Divine Mother's calling us to grab our hand, but yet we run away, just like that poem, The Hound of Heaven. He was running and running and running, and he felt that the hound was chasing him, going to catch him, going to destroy him, until finally he could run no more. And he looked and he saw that it was not a hound of heaven, it was God, all that time chasing him, to catch him, to be able to lift him up into the light. But yet he was afraid. And I think in the same way, we also sometimes are like that. And so we offer ourselves to God and have faith that God will be there for us. And I think this is the discipline and the strength and the Deposia we need, is to resist that tendency to go back out, that to be called back out into the cage, to say, no, I'm not going to do that anymore. I know I'm afraid, but I have faith. God is with me. I feel God's joy guiding me in everything I do. And we hold on to that, hold on to it. And you'll find ultimately it's true. God's hand is there. You might say it's what we thought was darkness was but the shade of thy hand blocking out momentarily. It was the shade of thy hand blocking out the light as it reached down to grab us, to draw us up into the light. And so how do we do this? Every moment, whatever comes, coming from God, see God's hand at work and respond to the degree that we can joyfully. Now, I know that's not an easy thing to do, but we can practice. Thank you, God. That's what a friend of mine would always say. And everything that would come, he would whatever trial would come, he get. I remember once we got a parking ticket, and he picks it and he looks at it and he says, "Thank you, God." Now he was, he was it was a little bit of a game he was playing, but nevertheless, the attitude, I mean, the direction was a good one. And I think if we can see, but not just on the surface, go in and feel that in the heart. And I wake up in the morning and I try to say, thank you, God. Another day. This is going to be the best day of my life. Thank you, God, for giving me this opportunity. And yes, I grumble, but I keep trying. And I think that's all we're asking one another to do, isn't it? It's just to keep trying. And that's what Master is asking of us. Face your challenges with joy. And you'll find that in time, you'd look back and you say, what were all those challenges anyway? It was just God, you might say, helping me. And every action then became a Kriya action in response to that. Some action that was going to help me become free of whatever karma was there in the past. So God bless all of you on this day of the solstice. And we enter a new phase. You know, Swami Sri Yukteswar used to say that these days, special days like this, astrologically significant days, astronomically and astrologically, they have a special power to them. And he used to celebrate on those days. So I think today's the International Yoga Day. And I think that's a very appropriate day on which to celebrate that. International Yoga, International Union with God, the day that all of us can come together and find our common bond, our commonality through the practice of yoga, through the practice of Kriya, through the practice of becoming one with God. So God bless all of you, and I will see you all again next Monday. Joy to you.